Hey everybody, this is Patrick Spencer, VP of Research and Corporate Marketing over at Kiteworks. We're thrilled to have you join our webinar roundtable discussion, LinkedIn live event. Depends on what channel you're joining from as to what we want to call it. We have two guests with us. We're hoping our Australian expert is going to be able to join here in a moment. But if you have just a few preliminary items, one, we picked this topic because we got a lot of feedback that organizations are seeking strategies in terms of what they should focus on in the coming year. All of us do that, obviously. So that was the reason we picked this topic. And then we thought, we have these influencers who are working with us who are experts in various areas. Why don't we ask them to pick their 3 top priorities for 2025, and each of them can talk about those priorities, but we'll make it an interactive conversation. I'll get out of the way and let the experts talk about what those 3 look like and how to go about actually executing on them in 2025. If you have questions, we'll try to get to those during today's discussion, as well as we'll leave a little bit of time at the end. Hit your Q&A button there at the bottom of your screen. If you're on the Zoom, if you're on LinkedIn Live, you can submit those, and then our team will carry those over into the Zoom, which is what we're viewing it from. And then if you have specific issues with the webinar, you can chat those questions over to us at the same time. Our colleague Denzel Allen, who manages a bunch of different stuff for us, he's online. He's helping to do the back-end moderation in the background. So let me jump into this and share my screen. Or try to do so here, and then we'll hop into it and let our guest introduce themselves. So there's the topic: how to future-proof your security posture in 2025. Roundtable discussion on evolving security and compliance challenges. And right now we have 2 of our 3 guests. We're hoping, like I said, Boston can join us here in a moment. So we'll skip back to him. If he joins, we'll let him introduce himself and provide some details in terms of what he does across the lake. But Umar, aka Chris Carter, he has, if you look at his LinkedIn profile, which we have at the end of the deck, he has a very impressive background. He's held a number of different roles. We can call him a startup and board advisor. He's a former CISO. He does some consulting work, and I'll let him introduce himself in a little more detail here in a second. And then we have Mike Crandell, who is the founder and CEO of Digital Beachhead. He's out in Colorado Springs. He has an impressive military career, 2 decades, so he has a lot of knowledge when it comes to how you go about implementing secure systems in the government sector. So, Umar, maybe let's start with you. You can talk a little bit about your background. I have found this past month or half month or so, we're not done with it yet, on Black History Month, your daily posts are fascinating in terms of the different individuals that you're calling up from a historical standpoint. Umar, do you want to introduce yourself? Hopefully he's not frozen here. Uh-oh. Well, Mike, let's start with you while Umar remediates his technical issue. Talk about your background a bit, a 2-minute overview for our audience.
I was going to say, welcome to
I don't know
2025.
if it's me. If you guys can hear me, just Mike, maybe raise your hands.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. It was working, of course, before we went into the production mode.
Actually,
It
like I
always
say,
works that way, right?
welcome to 2025. One of the first things we want to have happen is make sure our tech works for us and we don't work for it. But a little about me, I'm Mike Crandall. Patrick said I'm a 20-year military retiree, did 20 years in the Air Force, doing cyber things before we called them
I think
cyber
we're
things.
frozen, guys. Can you raise your hands, Patrick, if you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Umar. Apologies, everyone, for our technical issues here.
Oh, it's always
blame Comcast, I guess, or whatever local provider he has, right?
I blame them a lot, actually. Our ISPs are killer.
So go ahead, Mike, introduce yourself, and then Umar will have him do so here in a second.
I did 20 years in the military. I retired, didn't know what to do when I wanted to, didn't know what I wanted to be since I grew up, post-military, and then decided to work for a large company. Did that for 5 years. Realized that working for a corporate world wasn't for me unless I was in charge of myself. So I started Digital Beachhead, and we now do virtual CISO services for people. And we just recently were named as an authorized C3PO for CMMC ecosystem. So we're helping those government contractors get certified as they need it.
That's great. And that's a hot topic right now with CMMC now fully live, basically. It's here. It's a reality. So I want to spend a little time talking about that today. Umar, did you get your technical issues ironed out, or you want to go back to you here in a second? Sounds
Don't
like
know if
he's still
Umar can
having
hear
some
us,
issues.
but we hear him.
Denzel can work with him to see if he can figure out how to remediate the issue. Thanks for everyone's patience here. He's going to dial back in. So I'm going to skip ahead. And we'll talk about Mike's 3 priorities. Mike, at a high level, why don't you talk a bit about each of these, and then I have some questions that I have prepared, obviously ahead of time, and when Umar comes back, he probably has a couple things that he wants to chime in on. But your 3 priorities for organizations when it comes to cybersecurity in 2025.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So my first one is this analysis by paralysis where, I can't do anything. I can't afford anything. We're a small business or we've got what we've got. And I always say we have to look at the tools that maybe already exist and doing what we can with what we have. My philosophy there is cybersecurity, and you see the tools, you Google and you're like, oh my God, there's a million tools and a million companies and I don't know. And so sometimes we just freeze and say, let's do nothing. So I always say, start at your stack. What do we have now? Are you on the Microsoft platform? Are you on a Google platform? Are you in AWS? They have in tools already intrinsic to themselves that you can then maybe turn on or configure and see what you can do. That's step one. That gives you a place to start. Otherwise, doing nothing. I always laugh that the we talk to attorneys' offices and say, hey, we'd love to give you a pen test, or what are you doing for security? And they're like, no, no, no. If you tell us we have a vulnerability, we're more reliable. And I'm like, well, you have a vulnerability, you're liable because you don't even care to know you have it. So let's do something with what we have, right? We have to start somewhere. So the next step in that would be the cyber inventory. Um, what do we have? Most of us don't even know where our data is. We know we store it here, there. It's on OneDrive, SharePoint, Dropbox, wherever it may be. We have to get a collective of not only devices, and there's probably devices you don't know are connected. Oh my God, we have a thermostat in our office. We connected it to our Wi-Fi. That's part of your corporate network now. You have to include that in what you got to protect. To your data, what is your data? I ask people, Patrick, what is your sensitive data? And they'll either say all of it or none of it. I have nothing sensitive, or it's all sensitive. To the all sensitives, I say, well, when you invite people to the Christmas party, is that email as sensitive as your financial records? Probably not, right? You do
Unless
have
you're emailing
layers.
your financial records, right?
Or right, are you emailing your financial records to everyone because they're not important either, right? That goes to the other side of the question, exactly. And so it is really taking the time to look at yourself, right? Look inward, which then leads you back to one, because now you know what you have, what you need to protect, what tools do you have already in place, and then
What
the risk
percentage of
management.
organizations, Mike, when it comes to this classification of their inventory? Hey, Bossum, we
Hey,
were able
awesome.
to get him online. Great. We'll go back and have him introduce himself in a second. We skipped ahead because Umar's having some technical issues, and then I think you were as well joining. So, how many organizations actually have classified their data? We asked this question in our annual survey back in, I think we published in July, and we're going to do it again this coming July or June, somewhere in that time frame. And there is a sizable percentage that haven't, right? They don't know all the data they have. It's not classified, so it's one big lump sum, and that's not an effective way to run your governance programs when it comes to managing your data. So what's your experience in terms of the maturity level out there?
I would say most of the companies, when we're brought on, have no data labeling. They have some data separation, i.e., well, our finance department has access to this folder and our marketing department has access to this folder. We use username and groups for permission stuff. And I'm like, but do you know if someone emailed that, can they upload it to the marketing folder from the, there's no real control.
Hmm.
So I would say very few, very, very few take the time to not only just identify, but then to properly label, right? To identify it in the system technically so that you can protect it.
Yeah, yeah. Before you jump to three, I know we're going in a different order here and probably confusing the hell out of everybody. So what's new? Let me go back and have Bassem introduce himself. Bassem, you have a fascinating background as well. Guest lecturer at the university. Mike actually does that, which we just talked about a moment ago when he introduced themselves. Customer success experience in addition to cybersecurity, risk management. Talk a bit about your background. Couple master's degrees, I think, from Lebanon, actually. That's a whole different story, a whole different podcast in and of itself, I suspect.
Patrick, Mike, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so delighted to be with you today. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. I'm joining you from the amazing Sydney. It's 5 a.m., 5:13 a.m. in the morning. So that's why you can see me very fresh. First of all, you introduced me in the best possible way and the lovely way that I love to be introduced. Patrick, I have with me around 23 years of experience. I've been in this industry for a long period of time, and I was lucky enough to mix my experience between the industry experience and the academic experience, as you introduced me. Excuse me. I have with me a lot of academic research background as well. I've been lucky enough to be lecturing at majority of universities all around the globe, here in Sydney and in Lebanon and abroad. I worked for 70 to 80% of my experience of my time is with international and multinational companies, just to name few. Cisco, Citrix, VMware, Carbon Black, and a few others in telco as well. I've worked for Siemens and Ericsson. So all my life, as you mentioned, Patrick, I've been lucky enough to when the whole new business model as a subscription model started, I was lucky enough to start to have the customer success experience. And what does it mean, customer success? In a very magical formula, I can introduce it to you, is like customer success equal customer experience plus customer outcome. Plus my research, I can add the employee experience, because we always forget about the employee dimension to add to the formula. And to add to the context of this amazing webinar that we are talking about today is about cybersecurity. So I've been in the cybersecurity space for a long period of time. And then I had 23 years with me and said, it's time for me to create something different, to create something unique. So I started my own company here in Australia, in Sydney, and it's called Potec Australia. And with Potec, we are introducing something very unique to the market. We are talking about only cybersecurity here, and we are talking about differentiating services that we introduce to the market with a very special way, like red teaming, agile red teaming exercise, penetration testing. We are introducing as well Other than that, code reviews, we can do code reviews because we are engineering background. And I forgot to tell you that I have an engineering background as well with me, with 2 master's degree as academic degrees. And also, we have 3 major products that we are going to talk about. The whole concept today about digital risk protection. So we cover the digital risk protection and the SIEM, which is SIEM, the security information and event management. So I will stop here, and I can tell you more while you are asking me about the next steps. When I'm excited and passionate, I can talk more and more, and I will never stop. Thank you, Mike. I can see your beautiful smile.
You and Mike both are entrepreneurs in addition to your long list of accomplishments and career achievements. So you both are now working for yourselves, which is interesting. And we may talk about
Patrick, I like to say my boss is a real pain in the behind. You know what I mean? That's the only problem I have with working for myself.
yeah, you work 20 hours a day. I've
Never gives me
done
time
that.
off, doesn't believe it when I'm sick. Absolutely.
Yeah, very
And
true.
Mike, as you mentioned, that's the experience between the corporate life and the whole different life, because you are responsible and accountable to innovate, to come with something unique, test, fail fast. All of these things that you are empowered to do without being in a toxic or political environment, if you can allow me to say that. But yeah, you are free to innovate. You are free to test your idea and fail fast, as I said, because how you improve by making mistakes, right? Every mistake, it's an opportunity to learn something new and improve.
Yeah,
Very,
I
very,
say
very. Yeah.
a failure is a stepping stone to success.
That's right.
So Mike had started into his 3 priorities of awesome. The first one is do what you can with what you have. Right. There's a starting point. Don't stick your head in the sand and do nothing. Is nothing is not a strategy by any sense of the imagination. And then we got into the second point there about the cyber inventory and figuring out what you actually have and what you have in place. And that's where I'd ask him about data tagging. What percentage of his clients typically have that in place. It sounds like we still have a long way to go on that front, which I think our survey last year uncovered that data point, and probably everyone in our audience knows that as well. When we look at cyber inventory, knowing what data is out there, we have this new thing called AI. That's a whole different webinar, but I wanted to pose this question to both of you in terms of employees, contractors, even third parties outside your organization who are taking your data, which might be PII, might be IP, it could be financial documents, it could be a number of different things that you don't want to have exposed externally, and there may even be compliance regulations that prohibit such, and there's fines and penalties associated with those violations. Are you seeing more of your clients start to talk about shadow AI? There's a survey that came out a week or two ago where 10% of all the content that employees load into the public Gen AI LLMs is private data. That's and that should be a red flag that goes up anyone's pole in the front yard.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with a municipality and they were like, we want to include more AI in our processes and this kind of things. And I'm like, well, what data do you not want going into that AI? Are you using a public AI tool? Are you hiring a private, putting it in your infrastructure? Because that's an excellent point. AI has made our lives easier. I want to hire you, terminate you, whatever the data may be, and I go into some chat engine and say, create me a termination letter for Patrick Spencer's, here's his social, here's his home address, all the information I need to put in. Wow, that's now in the public sphere, and they don't realize it. They think this is helping me generate this letter. So as with everything, I think in cyber and in IT, it is about education. And I don't think the public is aware of really who owns things. I go back to all of these free websites and free applications that people have, and then are like, but they're taking my data. And I'm like, you gave your data away. It was part of the terms and conditions that we never read. We scroll and click the box and then download the app. Um, that's why it's free. Nothing is free. There's a cost somewhere, somehow they're making revenue. And so with the chat engines, again, they're learning from what we put in. So if they're learning and that's why they're free, then be careful what you put in, but people are not aware. So we have to just educate, educate.
And if you haven't classified your data, Mike, it becomes darn difficult to ascertain what they should and shouldn't put into the public LLMs, I suspect, right?
Absolutely. And or physically can. This data cannot be moved into internal sites. DLP works for me, woohoo.
Do on the other side, in Australia, Boston has IRAP, right? And then we have CMMC here, not exactly the same. IRAP's more like FedRAMP kind of, but regulations like these, do the two of you see that they're beginning to help drive best practices, at least in the government sector, the defense sector, in terms of how data is governed, that they're actually forcing organizations to ensure they have controls in place for tracking and controlling where it goes and who sees it and who views it and who can edit it and so forth.
Yeah, I would say, as with most things, regulation and requirements are what bring the people to the table. Otherwise, we do what we do. I have a firewall. I ask folks, oh, great, you have a firewall. How's it configured? And if their first question back is configured, what do you mean? I'm like, well, then you don't have a firewall. You have an appliance that's doing something for you that you have no clue. So one of the beauties of these compliance, these regulations, and I know they can be a pain, specifically on small businesses. They seem onerous, but I I look at it as, if you gave your data to someone, so I gave you my data, Patrick, what are my expectations you're doing with it? Okay, I need to do that too.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and when people break it down to that little level of, yeah, I want Patrick to protect all my data. How dare he not, put it in the right place with the right security? You're absolutely correct. And now I need to do that too because I'm collecting data.
Yeah. Basim, what are you seeing in Australia? Is IRAP driving some best practices in this area and good behaviors?
That's a very important topic, and thank you, Mike and Patrick, to talk about this. Yes, cybersecurity, you cannot achieve cybersecurity outcomes without talking about compliance. And Australia is very serious and very strict. We have the ISM, which is our risk management framework in Australia, which derived by the Department of Defense. As you mentioned, everything with federal, comparing to your FedRAMP, we have the IRAP. So Australia is very serious about data sovereignty and data compliance. So the IRAP, if you are not IRAP, when we are talking about like a cloud delivered service or a SaaS. Now, if you are hosting on-prem, this is another dimension. But talking about the seriousness of Australia, how serious we take our cybersecurity, we have introduced. We had previously a lot of cybersecurity acts, and we had the Privacy Act, but now we are introducing new laws. I'm not sure if you are following, but we are introducing new laws, and we are adding a lot of regulations on top of the new Privacy Act to make sure that people are compliant. Before, the government was not able to force the compliance and deliver fines or anything, but now we are seeing a lot of companies, unfortunately, being with the court cases So we are taking the data privacy and PII and HII, or every other personal identifiable into information, or health. Anything regarding to personal information, it should be very strict, enforcing a lot of security controls. So this is very important. If you want to work with federal governments, agencies, or departments, you cannot deliver cybersecurity services or products if you are not IRAPed.
Yeah. And did you see a number of organizations, they ended up being prohibited from conducting business with the government because they failed to do IRAP? Awesome, or is that still kind of playing out? And then I'm curious, Mike, what do you foresee is going to happen with CMMC when it comes to the defense sector here in the States?
To be honest, sorry, Mike, if you allow me. As I said earlier, Australia is very serious about those things and about the breaches or being compliant. If you are not IRAP, you cannot be on the panel. You cannot provide any, even you cannot be subcontracting. And we have a very exhaustive vetting process. This is a very important topic. If it depends on because we follow the MAC, the mandatory access control, as you know, as every other government. And if you are not cleared, you cannot touch. And even if you are not local in Australia, because some people, they can say they can provide, for example, SOC services or any other services for government. And they say, yeah, we are hosted locally in Australia, but second level or third level engineering support, they will be outside of Australia. With federal, you cannot. Even everyone who's reading, everyone who's touching, everyone who's interacting with day-to-day, the operation routine, you have to be local, and not only local, you have to be Australian citizen. To be very specific and very particular about this one. Australian citizen, and you have to have the right clearance to work with the government agencies. Now, on the other hand, we have seen a lot of cybersecurity vendors that they might not be, of course, IRAP, and a lot of, we have a lot of, and we are part of the Five Eyes, so we have the trust of the, the Five Eyes countries. You can provide some services even to the federal agencies, but it depends on the federal agencies. If, for example, we are talking about Australian Bureau of Statistics, or like really dealing with public data, not classified data, then you can deliver some services to the federal or to the government agencies. Now, you can, if you are not IRAP or you are not locally present in Australia, you can still deliver or provide services and products, platforms, but of course not for the federal and government.
So it's resulting in some organizations just can't do business any longer, and is driving positive behaviors in most instances. So, Mike, you're a 3 CPA, so you have probably some defense industrial base contractors and subcontractors coming to you now. Are they panicking? Are they in worse shape than they actually believe, like some of the surveys show? Or what are you seeing?
What we're beginning to see is, yes, they believe it's finally real. I had a phone call this morning with a potential client that was very much like, we've heard about it, and now we're told we have to do it, and they're just starting. We've had people we've contacted that were like, we think we're almost ready for this assessment. We've really, dug into it. And the biggest failure we're seeing is everyone knows NIST 800-171, the CMMC controls have 110, right? What they fail to realize is there's objectives. There's 320 objectives, and they haven't even thought about the objectives. They're like, do I know who my users are on my network? Yes. there, I've met it. And it's like, no, there's 4 steps to that. You have to meet each of the 4 steps. So those are the disconnects, you know. And to your point about are people going to lose contracts? There's a new Army contract coming out, and they're requiring that you either have a level 2 certification or at least are on the books to get one, or you can't bid on the contract. So I don't think anyone will lose work because current contracts don't have it written in, but
Future
going
work.
forward,
Yep.
it'll be in there.
Yeah. Well, and if 50% of your revenue is coming from the DIB, you can't put that risk. You got to be in touch with Mike's organization or a comparable organization, getting your CMMC house in order. Mike, I want to get to some of Boston's top 3. Let's finish up your third one here. It's all about risk management. Talk a bit about that.
So I do a lot of briefings, and the title of the briefing is Cybersecurity is a Myth. And I say it's a myth because people think you can be cyber secure. That to me imparts an endpoint. Like I've done it. I've got there. I'm cyber secure. And that's never going to happen. If the governments that we, fall under spend hundreds of millions to secure data and they're breached, a company who has a much smaller budget than hundreds of millions for just cybersecurity is not going to be able to guarantee or be cyber secure. So for me, it's about the risk management. Going back to my first bullet, do what you can with what you have and increase as you can. It's a roadmap. It's a journey. It's not a destination you're going to reach.
Yeah, those are great recommendations. Let's switch back to, if I can get my browser to work here. Back to Boston's 3 items here. But Boston, let's start with your first priority for 2025: proactive threat disruption with DRP. Talk a bit about that.
Thank you so much, Patrick. As you know that we all, when we talk about cybersecurity, we forget about the attack continuum. And with the attack continuum, we talk about before, during, and after the attack, I mean. And then we follow mostly because we come from the threat modeling or threat landscape. And the first thing that came to our mind as cybersecurity professionals is how to be categorized in the attack kill chain. So all the companies, when they think about how to invest, they invest in the during and after. That's very important. Yes, 60, 70, 80%. I'm not going to argue about the percentage here. The investment goes to the after the fact, because during and after is like it's post-tenure, it's post-event. It happened already. So for me is like, what can be so special if we shift left, in the attack kill chain and go to the prevention and protection more than and during the attack to monitor and detect, put detection capabilities in place. So
Something that certainly happened in the software development arena, right? So you're seeing that same mentality spill over into the general side.
By design, exactly, Patrick. You nailed it. It's like we have to shift left, and security is doing things by design at the early stages. So imagine waking up to the news and that your company sensitive data is being traded on the dark web. Do you know about it? Because as Mike said, cybersecurity will never be a destination. It's a journey. So do you have visibility? Because cybersecurity is all about contextual visibility. If you don't know about it, you cannot secure it. You cannot put security control in place. So the thing about the DRP, which is digital risk protection, is how to learn more about your threat and dismantle or disrupt this threat at the source, right? So think of DRP like having neighborhood watch on the internet instead of waiting for bad actors to enter your house. So you spot suspicious activities before they escalate. For example, if you are living in in a neighborhood that they are very peaceful, even you can sleep and leaving your door open, right? I'm joking here, but if you are in a risky area, you will put more security controls. You will lock the door. You will put more locks. You will put fences. You will put a lot of other controls. So the thing is that with the digital risk protection is how to make sure we work proactively, not reactively, not react after the fact. Is go on the left side of the attacker chain and learn more about what's happening. Because as I said, if you don't know about your adversaries in the art of war, you have to be 5 steps ahead. You already lost the game.
Are you guys seeing this dark web threat intelligence theme that you have here on your slides, Bassem? Quite interesting to me. Question for both of you. Are you seeing more and more organizations wanting to look at that intelligence and use it to proactively address potential threats? Because you know what passwords have been compromised because they're published on the dark web. You know what codes there and so forth. And AI, I would think that's the positive thing of AI. It's going to enable us to be much more adept at looking at those mounds of data than actually doing something actionable in a rapid period of a rapid time frame.
This is very interesting topic you are bringing here, Patrick. The dark web is like an underground marketplace. You cannot stop what you cannot see. What if you had eyes in every alley? So it's a way of how do you learn more about your data, where it is, instead of just leave things for chances. So this is very important topic as well, talking about AI, because the expansion or the added functionalities and capabilities into platforms, it's about how to innovate, and you cannot innovate without having AI ML in place. So discuss the AI driven monitoring and how the contextualized intelligence will help the SOC people during and after, and the SIEM to deliver more actionable insights. So now you know that the pain of the SOC people is like triage, triage fatigue, because if you don't know about 0-day, if you do, as you mentioned, credential theft, expired, or those are info stealers, malware, that your credentials are already in the dark web, in the deep web. So if you don't know about those things, you've already lost the game. So as if you are waiting for something to happen and detect and improve. No, don't wait, be proactive, go see what's happening in there, and you can be proactive to be ahead of your adversaries, even 5 steps.
Yeah, I agree. Mike, are you seeing more discussion here in the States about leveraging dark web intelligence to proactively address threats, or even set the stage so that you can respond to breaches when they take place?
I'm seeing those of us in the cyber community realizing the potential. I'm not seeing a lot of commercial businesses understanding it. I literally had a call with a client, and they're like, "Can you explain what the dark web is?" They just had no clue what it was or anything about it. And so um, I see the importance. We provide our clients a brief look. And for me, I tell them one of the biggest things is, why is your company email on the dark? What it was pilfered from someone, if not from you. So are they using it Target, Walmart? Where is your company emails being used? You might need to look into that.
Yeah, that's quite true. Hey, Mar, did we get your audio working?
I'm back. My computer
Oh, it
literally
works.
crashed. My
We can
computer
hear you.
literally crashed, so I'm on my phone. Apologies.
Oh,
Uh,
no worries.
we went in reverse order, which is not unusual with some of the webinars I do. So we start with Mike, and then Bassem was able to join, and we're sort of in the midst of his 3 priorities here. Let's finish those up, and then we'll do a quick intro for you, and then you can cover your 3 to wrap up the
Sounds good.
roundtable. So Bassem, the threat disruption with DRP. We talked a bit about the dark web, visibility and intelligence. The last one here we talked a bit about as well, but shifting left, it's just not in software development, it's cybersecurity in general. Speak to what that means, and are you seeing traction with your clients? Do they get this issue, and what are the actionable things that they're doing in response?
Patrick, you mentioned earlier about maturity. It's part of maturity. The attackers plan long before they strike. So you have to ask yourself, what if your defense started even earlier? So we are introducing the shifting left concept. Is like the security integrated early in the development life cycle. So it's security by design, and you always think how to improve, enhance the contextual, into your security events. So the exposure monitoring and integrating the DRP with your SOC, it leads to rapid risk reduction, because once you know about the threat, your threat will be, reducing false positive, removing all those false negative, make sure that you talk about security incident, not security event. This is very strategic here, and the nuance is very, as I mentioned earlier, the triage fatigue, so you need to find the needle in the haystack here. So it's like what you can provide me. Yes, with the maturity, we are talking about DevSecOps now, being agile. So I will give you example. That fintech company reduced their security incidents by almost 40% by integrating security testing at the development stage. So see how much you are reducing investment, and you are saving money, effort, time, and exposure early in the stages, instead of waiting till after the fact.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Mike, and then let's jump over to Umar's slides, but are you finding that those organizations that have been proactive, as Bassam just described, are they better prepared for CMMC when you go in and do that audit?
Yeah, I found a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, the company who is like, yeah, we've heard about it, now we're just starting. It's not something you turn on. You just don't go, let me turn on the button and now I'm CMMC certified. It's a trek to get there. So those people that have been thinking about it, implementing small changes, growing with it instead of expecting it to be something I just turned on when I'm ready, are much further ahead than those that are, thinking, okay, I guess we got to do it now. Let's get started, and realize it's not a quick turn. It's
The
time.
OS moment, right? We got to
Yes,
be clear about what we got.
it hits the fan, and then they're like, oh, I don't know what to do.
So, Umar, I'm not sure what you heard. I had given a short intro to you, and I noted everyone's got to check out your LinkedIn feed, because on a daily basis for Black History Month, you've had these really cool posts about historical figures every day, a new person, and how they contributed to well, the global world, whether it's mathematics or philosophy or religion. It's really quite fascinating, the posts you had. So for our audience, check those out. But Umar, maybe a quick 45-second introduction on your background, then we can jump into some of your priorities and walk through those.
Sure, absolutely. I'll go as quickly as possible. So it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I am a former CISO. Just recently stepped off the CISO bandwagon, or the CISO train. Part of that, I was more on the sales side, working with CISOs, providing them with advisory services around how to ensure that their security posture aligns with business objectives and obligations, as well as their mission. And prior to being in security, I actually worked as a CFO in many different organizations. So I come to cybersecurity with a sort of a business lens. I'm not necessarily a technologist, I'm more of a strategist in looking at cybersecurity from the business or the board's perspective. So with that, I'll just jump right into my top.
Just to throw in a little more on your background, you were at Harvard Business School, I think, and studied cyber risk policy and so forth, which I'm sure
Yeah,
lends itself very
this,
well for the things that you do. So
yeah, I studied under Mr. Schneier, so Yeah, many interesting stories. We don't have time to get into those stories today, but um, many interesting stories. And again, it's primarily around policy. You know, the gentleman Carter, I can't remember, he was here at the end of the day, Obama administration. So just a lot of folks who really know what they're talking about at the national level, learning from them and trying to understand how to, improve companies' security posture.
Yeah. So jump into
So
your
with that,
top three
go
priorities.
ahead.
Mark, sorry, I spoke over
No,
you.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said let's jump into your top three priorities. The first one here about board communications and engagement. That seems to pop up often, obviously.
Yeah, that's to me, again, looking at it through the lens of the board, primarily speaking, when I've advised CISOs or boards, we talk about the 4 Rs when it comes to cybersecurity, why cybersecurity exists and why it's important to effectively communicate how we manage our risk and having those risk aligned with the missions, obligations, and objectives of the organization. So the 4 Rs, generally speaking, are, you talk about revenue, right? You have to protect the revenue, the risk associated with revenue. You have to protect the regulatory, right? You have regulators at your door, depending on your sector or your industry or the vertical with which you in which you operate. And then your reputation, of course, is also key. And then finally, it's the resilience. You got to be able to come back. Bassam kind of alluded to that. When there's an incident, properly prepare and ensure that you're in a spot where you're able to quickly recover and maintain operations prior to the incident or event occurring. So I specifically chose effective board communications because, information rolls up to the board. And as the information rolls up to the board, it becomes more strategic, less granular. And a lot of things can happen throughout that process in terms of how the information is collated and how the information is then communicated up. And I saw this when I worked as a CFO. We had revenue one year, let's say, of 8 point, what was it? It was 8.3, something like 8.45 million. So the controller rolled it up as 8.5 million. And then the CFO said, let's just roll it up as 9 million. So, right. So when information gets communicated up, we have to ensure that that information is accurate and we're communicating on the same page. But primarily speaking, we need to do this because, the board has a fiduciary responsibility to demonstrate duty of care. And in doing so, they must address the concerns of their stakeholders primarily being your customers, your regulators, and your partners, or whoever you do business with, or whoever has their fingers or their hands in your in the way you operate and do business. And so, at the board level, they're focused on the risk appetite and governance. And so it's critical, it's crucial that the information that's being communicated up to the board is accurate, it's timely, and it's relevant.
Yeah.
Again,
The boards, Umar, do they get cyber risk, or you have to spend a lot of time educating them? Does it depend on the industry?
I think it depends on the board members. Sometimes you have board members who they understand risk, and then from a cyber perspective. But the challenge often comes from the individual who's reporting up to the board. So perhaps you'll have a CISO going in and said, we have 15 firewalls, we have to update the firewall rules, and we have to make sure that the ports and protocols are. And then at that point, you see board members start switching over to their phones or doing things that demonstrate that they don't really understand and they don't care or they do care, but they just don't understand the information that's being communicated to them. So it's really important for the CISO or the CIO or whichever risk, whoever is responsible for reporting that risk, speaks in a language that the board understands and resonates and driving action around how do we buy down risk. So rather than saying we want to invest in a set of firewalls and an IAM program, and we want to make sure that our privileged access management systems are working, you would say something along the lines of, we we have personal information that needs to be protected, and therefore we're going to put controls in place that's going to buy our risk down from, let's say, $50 million to $10 million. The cost of that is going to be $1 million. So the board understands that language. And so to answer your question specifically, usually the challenge is how the information is transmitted to the board, how it's received, or sometimes it really goes over their heads because of the way it's been communicated.
Makes sense. Number two,
I call
zero
that
trust.
Patrick.
Good,
I call
Mike.
that Patrick translation. We're the translator between the IT people doing it and the board members that want to know we're doing something, but they don't, to Umar's point, they don't want to hear the technical stuff that just, we have to translate it.
Unless it's a former CISO, and I think Umar, I think Bassa maybe as well. I forgot, maybe all of you are board members for some organization and get cybersecurity. As former CFO, they probably aren't. Not to take anything away from CFOs or certainly marketing people.
Yeah, and that
You're not
therein lies the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Umar.
No, but yeah, therein lies the challenge, right? Because you look at, let's say you're at the C-suite level, the CFO is focused primarily on insurance and the level of exposure. So how do we, from a financial perspective, manage that? Bassam, I think you have your hands up. Go ahead. I apologize.
Thank you, Amar. I was just trying to add to make sure that the thing is, before, if we are comparing before and now, it's a board level discussion. Before we used to, it's the perception of the cybersecurity. It has been seen as a cost center. It's like, why do we need it? Today, the shift, the transformation has happened, and now it's like the CEO will ask himself the first question to the board: How am I exposed? What's my risk posture? Am I going to be in the news tomorrow? So it will never be it's not a question of if now or even when. It's for how long you've been exposed and you are not aware of it. As we mentioned earlier, if you remember, Patrick and Mike and Omar, thanks for explaining that concept. Is like, it's not about what you know now. It's about your prediction, what's going to happen tomorrow or after, because what you don't know. And what you know, it's about if you are going to be proactive and do threat hunting, and be innovative in your approach. And as I mentioned earlier in the digital risk protection, so it's like attack surface. It's all everywhere. You have to make sure that you understand where are your resources. Even now we are talking about the agile and being very agile is the SecDevOps. We are using a lot of other cloud instances or tools or platforms like GitHub, GitLab, Postman, Telegram. All of those, services, how much they are secured, and how much you are relying on them. Are you leaving things to chances? Because yes, we have a policy, but what if your developer is bypassing the policy, is testing some functionality from his personal account on the GitLab, GitHub, and he unintentionally forgot something out there and he moved on. And you know what happened, Omar and Mike, I think they can help me with that. What happened to Microsoft, the source code. And every day you hear source code or even data has been breached, and it's on the news. So if you be on the news, it's a board level discussion and it's a business enabler. It's not a cost center anymore.
Yes. And so, Bassam, thank you. I appreciate that, because you basically, at the beginning of the talk, I said there are 4 R's that we focus on, and I think you covered 2, right? The resilience, in terms of how do you ensure that people don't do silly things that lead you to a place where you could potentially end up in the news, which will damage your reputation. So thank you for helping me, or underscoring the importance of, those 2 R's, reputation and resilience. So you build those systems to ensure that the organization is able to achieve its mission, obligations, regulatory or otherwise, and its objectives, right? Revenue or otherwise. So I know we're down to about 5 minutes, so I'll
Yeah,
quickly.
Umar, maybe, I was interested because some of the discussion we just had related to third parties and the risk they pose,
Yeah.
building off of what,
So
maybe talk a bit about number 3. We can go back to number 2 if we have time.
yeah, I think we kind of covered zero trust. Bassam, I think may have touched on that a little bit. Yeah, so I would actually edit this and say it's nth party. I should have thought more. It's nth party because why? A lot of times you'll have third party who has a third party who has a second party who has a third party. So now your risk and Bassam talked about your attack service is now been exposed to a point where if you don't know, then it's unable to manage the risk, which is why it's very important for organizations to have the ability to do dynamic security posture checking on those organizations that have access to your critical data or your critical systems or processes. I lost my notes because I'm on my phone, so I'm just going, I'm freestyling it, but it's really important. Why? Because it could potentially disrupt operations in a manner that is undesirable. And again, are you able to recover? How quickly are you able to recover? So it's important that, in your relationship with third party or nth parties, you have SLAs, and you have contractual agreements in terms of what is expected in the event of an undesired incident. There should also be continuous monitoring. Another point you may want to think about is, do you have an asset inventory, and how do you view your third party or nth party risk management within the context of your asset inventory? What systems and what applications or services or data are they accessing? And therefore, you got to have those controls in place to ensure that, your data is being protected. And so I'll stop there. I know we have 3 more minutes left. I can continue,
I think
but
you
I'll
were
take
here
a
for the
pause.
conversation Mike and I had when we started about 50 minutes ago, because we talked about that exact issue, Umar. You drove that point home for sure. That's great. And we would argue that, you need
Sorry,
to have governance controls as well, right? I think, I don't know what you guys think of that. That's part of that third party risk management. If you don't control where the data goes and who it goes to, then you lose sight of that very, very quickly. And you don't have that log as well where you can actually trace it. Bassam, I think you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not to interrupt you, but I wanted to add on Umar's to the point. It's the third party. We are talking about 0 day. We are talking about supply chain. Very important nowadays. If you are using a third party or you are using a library, to ask for an SBOM. Inventory visibility is very, very important. Test before, as we said, security by design. Zero trust. It means tested. Make sure that you understand the business logic, the workflow. What does it do before going into production? So it's all about your appetite, your risk, to make sure that you follow rigorously all those testing in terms of what if this library, what if this code, what if the business logic. So every environment is different. It doesn't mean that it works there. And vulnerability is all about what we know, but 0 day, it's not what you know. It's you have to find out yourself, right? And you have to do your code review, the quality check, and the SBOM, and make sure that the supply chain is clear from 0 day as much as possible. And then Omar, as he said, and also Mike reflected on, yes, we do our best, probably 80, 90, 99, whatever the number you would pick, even 99%, you are risk for 1%, still unknown. And here you go, you have to be ready. You put all the security controls, but what about the incident response? So you have to always think in mind, like, what if things can go, bad?
That's a great point. We're basically out of time, but let's do a quick, we got Boston's final thoughts there. That's great. So he started us off. Mike, and then we'll finish it off with Umar. But Mike, any final thoughts in terms of takeaways for our audience?
I would say again, going back to my first point, do what you can with what you have. Ignoring cybersecurity isn't going to do anything to protect you. If you change your passwords every 90 days, just something simple, but start there. And then my military philosophy is crawl, walk, run. So if you're still crawling, crawl, but get there, you know?
Good, that's great. Umar, any thoughts? I'm glad you're able to join. You have a lot of
Yeah.
great thoughts for our
No,
audience.
yeah, I want to make sure we end on time. I'd like three key takeaways, right? First is develop an effective framework in how you communicate risk, uh, opportunities, and potential investments to the board. That's the first point. The second is you need to have a practical zero trust implementation strategy and policy. Someone referenced earlier that it's not really it's not you don't flip the switch. It's a continual journey. It's an ever ending. There's a never ending journey. And then obviously the last and final point is around third party risk or nth party risk management. Having tools and metrics for continuous vendor monitoring is critical because that allows you to effectively manage your attack surface.
No, that's great. That's a fabulous way to wrap it up. Awesome. Thanks for getting up at 4:30 in the morning your time. Umar, I'm glad you're able to get the internet issues solved, and Mike gave us a great start to today's conversation. Our audience is definitely going to find these items very helpful as they prepare for the rest of 2025. I have everyone's LinkedIn profiles up on the screen. Feel free to get in touch with any of these three gentlemen. I really appreciate their time today. Appreciate the audience for making time out of your very busy days to join us for today's discussion. And we look forward to having you on our next LinkedIn Live event, Zoom roundtable discussion. Have a great day.
Thank you, Patrick.
Patrick,
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
thank you.